Although the first Channel 3 broadcast wasn't until 1954, the story of WCAX began in Vermont in the 1930s.
Vermont was somewhat of a backwater. We were a very rural state, agriculturally focused, not much industry here. It was a state whose population hadn't grown a lot at that point, and we didn't have the infrastructure that we do today. We had unpaved segments of our state highways. There were parts of the Northeast Kingdom that didn't get electric service until around 1960. So we were a fairly remote, very conservative place that really hadn't begun to develop in the 50s. We had radio for several decades, but it was still newspapers that people relied on principally.
There was one newspaper publisher in particular who moved to Burlington and would change the face of Vermont media.
C.P. HASBROOK had moved here in 1938. He was a newspaper man, and he had been publisher of the Richmond Times-Dispatch in Virginia, as had his father. So he bought the Burlington Daily News, and it had with it a little 100-watt radio station, which was called WCAX Radio. When radio was every bit as revolutionary a medium as, say, the internet is now. So he took the power up to 1,000 watts, and then after the war took it to 5,000 watts. He needed an engineer to do all these things, and he happened to have a son-in-law who was a very highly qualified electrical engineer. So that's how Red got into the broadcast business.
And Stuart was working as an engineer in Boston, and I remember the way Stuart put it. I'll still remember this. He said, and it was assumed that I would go to Vermont and build it. And and he said it if you knew Stuart Martin in his matter-of-fact way, that he would go to Vermont and he would build it.
C.P. HASBROOK was very interested in radio, and then he had the bright idea about there's no television station in Vermont. He could foresee that television was the coming thing. Television was going to take over. There's no doubt about that.
We were the last place without a lot of things. And after the flood of 1927, we were really without a lot of things. There was not a television station, but there was the opportunity. And of course, Mount Mansfield, tallest mountain, had all the possibilities.
So you put a transmitter on top of Mount Mansfield, the highest point in the state of Vermont, right? And the signal goes right, left, north, south. You cover a huge area.
But C.P. HASBROOK and his stepson Stuart Red Martin weren't the only ones eyeing Mount Mansfield for the chance to bring TV to Vermont.
My dad, with a fellow named Sepp Roosh in Stowe, Vermont, was looking very seriously into television. And he went up and scouted out the top of Mount Mansfield and came back with great plans. Then he took Sepp back up to where he thought everything should be. And Sepp said, that's a very interesting idea, but I would point out to you that in the midst of winter, the drift of snow off the nose of Mount Mansfield puts the level of snow sometimes at 30 feet. And that stymied my father. And Channel 3 bit the bullet. They took the chance, and they went up there and worked through all the foldy roll and got it going.
They had to build a station, and they had to build a studio. They had to build a transmitter link. They had to build a road to our present building. That's a lot of building. I mean, we were building it from scratch. It wasn't like it was a turnkey operation.
I mean, to be able to put this station together at that time, that had to be so hard. Getting all that equipment up there on the mountain. I mean, just absolutely amazing. I mean, we all take it for granted. I mean, there were steps along the way, and you just gradually build. And it started with the first shovel into the ground up there on the mountain.
You're on top of a tall mountain. You're at the end of a long road that is difficult to get things like 40 or 50-foot antennas up the road. You can't get a wheeled vehicle to the top of the mountain until Memorial Day, and you have to believe that snow is going to start sometime about the first to second week of October.
They were on the edge for taking that kind of a chance. It worked out, and it worked out well.
We would not have had television in Montpelier, where I grew up, had it not been for that transmitter. It was a major feat when that went up there. I think it helped CX become not just a Burlington, greater Burlington area station, but for everybody.
All of a sudden we were told, because I was working radio here to start with, I was told that the station had applied for a TV channel, and the rest is history.
Jim, the test panel's on the air, and everything is normal here at the transmitter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, now.
Telecasting on Channel 3 from the top of Vermont.
My God, that was television. First time we ever saw it. And I began to pester my father, but we didn't have much money. My father didn't think we needed television, but I badgered him, and I think it was probably 1957. He caved in.
Mr. Davis, what made you decide to buy a television set?
A short time ago, I made the remark that I wouldn't have a television set in my house, and after seeing 2 or 3 sets in operation and watching a few wrestling matches and a little boxing, I changed my mind and I bought a set. I've had it a few months now, and after watching it for some time, I wouldn't trade it for the best cow I've got in my barn.
We got it. It came in the afternoon. We could not get it hooked up till the next day. So we took it out of the box, we set it on the table in the living room, and the whole family that night stared at it.
There was so much excitement. The only thing you had was an antenna. Antennas picked up a pretty good signal of Channel 3. You adjusted your antenna. You'd see people up on the roofs adjusting the antenna, and the wife down below saying, okay, oh, no, little more, little more. The old man up on the roof adjusting it. How's that, honey?
Crackle and crackle, you'd move the antenna around and try not to move in that side of the room and block the signal, and you start seeing things.
It was a tremendous impact. Restaurants noted it, bars noted it, people stayed home and watched television. And there was some very good programming that kept them home.
The early years of WCAX were a time of excitement and exploration. They had to find out what worked and why. Before Channel 3 became commonplace, viewers got to know names like J.A. Sullivan, Howard Lankor, Tony Adams and Stuart Hall, Helen Workman, Dusty Boyd, and Ken Green, who hosted the popular show Dance Date.
So that, from the outset, was a search on the part of Channel 3 to find things. And here comes Dick Clark and Pat Boone and all that stuff. And they created their own.
What's your name?
Buddy McQueen.
From where?
St. Albans.
St. Albans. You've got a bashful date over here. Would you step up too? Don't go too far. Who's this?
Carol Earl.
How are you today?
Pretty good.
Well, good. You're actually now at home looking at yourself. What do you think your reactions are going to be?
Yeah.
They had by design or accident, they had a set of recognizable and memorable characters on air that caught people's fancy.
As the sun goes down in the west, it's time to join Dusty Boyd at the chuck wagon. He's just finished his evening meal, so let's see what Dusty's up to.
Doggone that cook. Got me stuck for doing the dishes again.
And my father started watching it religiously. He loved Lawrence Welk. It instantly changed lives.
Well, I think TV changed people's lives everywhere, and Vermont was no exception. You saw things for real.
There's nothing like the actual image, and that's what television brought us to Vermont in the 50s.
You began to realize that there were other ideas out there, and there was another party, the Democrats, they weren't all evil. So there was an opening of the mind that television had something to do with. And then it came like an avalanche. Television, the interstates, people, outsiders moving in. It came in a great wave in the late 50s and into the early 60s. Everything changed.
A lot of places, WCAX was the television station for decades. It was what you turned to. You didn't even really think about it as, I'm going to turn on Channel 3, as I'm going to turn on the television. It opened up Vermont to the rest of the world. The state went through, really vast changes in terms of the influx of people from out of state, the growth of the population, the change in politics. It really was a really transformational time, and there's no doubt that not only did WCAX help with that change, but also reflected it.
it was treated more like a novelty. And after the novelty wore off, then it got down to being very, very serious about how you take care of your public.
Then in 1958, C.P. HASBROOK stepped down, and Red Martin became the president of WCAX. His personality and philosophies would shape the future of Channel 3.
Well, Red, although not a broadcaster initially, became one because he cared about the community where he and his family lived.
Red Martin was interested in the technology of television like children are interested in toys. And I know he kept the station, at the forefront of technological change.
Being technically minded, he didn't mind spending the money to keep us number one.
It was a case of you did not want for equipment. The editing gear that we had at that point was better than what was on the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
And he saw and understood the importance of news and doing it right.
Red Martin did not believe in the model of the pretty face on television. He wanted people who had a keen intellect.
What he wanted to make sure was that Channel 3 was the place that had Vermont.
He thought our responsibility and our role was to present information. Whether it's good information or bad information, Vermonters have a right to know.
The person delivering the news in the Red Martin philosophy was the one you could trust and respect the most because that person had made the decisions about the news.
After 10 years of experimentation, the arrival of Richard Mickey Gallagher brought a trio together that came to define the Channel 3 news and what it would become.
The day wasn't complete without hearing the news from Mickey, the weather from Stuart, and the sports from Tony.
They were on the air for decades. Those same people were there, and it was like part of an extension of your family. You turned on the news because it was on at 6 o'clock. That was just part of the culture, really.
And that's our report this Thursday evening. I'm Richard Gallagher.
Mickey Gallagher, Richard Gallagher, was a good old-fashioned newsman.
He was one of the best writers that I've ever come across. Who, what, when, where, why, how. You better have those basic 5 W's in your story, because if you haven't answered them, people will notice it right away.
Mickey really set Channel 3 up in a hard-nosed news operation. He used to say, just give the news.
Hello once again, everybody, and welcome to University of Vermont Hockey Live here on Channel 3.
Good night, good sports. That about wraps it up for now. Till tomorrow night at the same time, Tony Adams, good night, good sports.
Tony Adams was a fixture, and he was wonderful. And, everybody knew him. He was the sports guy.
When the local basketball team was on television, everybody in town, had Channel 3 on. Now, that was very clever stuff for Channel 3 to do.
What a ridiculous way to do television, huh? Is that ridiculous or what? You bring the whole team into the studio. Do you know what that meant to every small town in Vermont? There they are. Those are our kids. And people feel good about that. And Tony Adams was wise enough to get that.
This is the weather, this is the time. Time to say so long till we meet again.
Stuart Hall, great weatherman.
I'd say Stuart and Red Martin both cut from the same cloth in the sense that it was important to let everybody know what was going to be happening, but you don't want to hype it.
I once read at a museum in Washington, D.C., that journalists write the first draft of history. And that's true, and if you don't take that seriously, you're in the wrong business. Our news had to be news that you could trust.
Probably the most significant thing that happened was that we went to 1 hour of news at 6. That was a very unusual thing to do.
Well, I said they were biting off more than they could chew. It was, before the time of videotape.
We didn't have computers in those days. We had paper with carbons in them, and we used to write our scripts on that. This was the industry standard. They said you could drop this out of a helicopter at 500 or 600 feet and pick it up and keep shooting. All the film had to be taken back to Burlington to be processed. Getting that stuff back to the station, getting it processed, getting it written, it was a bear.
I'd go to the ferry landing with a roll of film, and I would start at the head of the line and ask anybody if they were going to Burlington, would they drop this off wherever they went? And I had a $5 bill in my hand. We paid them. Never lost a roll of film. It made the 6 o'clock news every night. Many people said, oh, is this going to be on the news tonight? I said, yes. And they said, we'll take it right there. We know where the station. Many people brought it right there, and we're glad to do it. They felt part of the program.
It was really a challenge to find enough news and enough content to fill an hour every day with the type of staff that they had. So they dug into what was happening in state government and in communities and really told people important things that helped shape their lives.
You could do an in-depth interview instead of just a couple of quick questions.
It was the news program, You Can Quote Me, and that was a grilling to be on there.
Will there be sufficient substance to the new federalism to provide a basis for your new statism when the legislature convenes in January?
You Can Quote Me was very popular, and it still is, but then I think every politician watched it. It was just, to stay informed, you had to watch it. And then there was the more benign and folksy Across the Fence.
Hello, I'm Len Jarvis, and welcome to Across the Fence.
But I think the hour-long news program is what, for so long now has set them apart.
It was an era of strong competition, which also saw the arrival of a young reporter named Marcellus.
And you don't consider yourself poor, though?
I don't think so, no.
We always competed. We competed with the newspaper. We felt we were strong enough. The biggest thing we had to worry about was the Burlington Free Press, the Rutland Herald, the Barrie Times Argus. I always consider them my main competition because they had a lot of resources too.
Richard Gallagher was the newsman who said, the news comes first. Do what you got to do to get the news on.
There's nothing like being the first with a story, with a good story. Nothing like it. It makes your day.
News competition was at its highest, and Vermont got so much done. So much of that came about because of the news media watching closely, There was a press meeting in Montpelier, and Mickey was there, and Kendall Wild was there, who was the managing editor of the Rutland Herald, and he was tougher than nails. And he was a liberal and Mickey was a conservative, and they never agreed on anything. And they were at the bar, and they ended up in the parking lot swinging at each other. There was a real fight out in that parking lot. The news competition in Vermont was very, very intense. The fact that the head of two of the three most influential news organizations in the state would end up in fisticuffs over a matter of something to do with the administration of state government says something wonderful about the passion that existed in the news media in this state. And one of them was a Rutland Herald guy, and one of them was a Channel 3 guy.
October 12th, 1984, was a day that would change the course of the Channel 3 news.
Good evening, I'm Marcellus Parsons. The man who delivered this news for 20 years is dead. Richard Gallagher, whom we all knew as Mickey, died this afternoon of a massive heart attack. He had just turned 58 this past Monday.
I recall the broadcast that night when the teaser was a death in our family, and all of us wondered who that could be, and learned in a very short time that Mickey had left us.
It was a shock to me. It was very sudden.
Mickey did his usual stint as host of You Can Quote Me. They recorded the show at 11 that morning. He took the usual, went home to lunch, and did not return. He died just after lunch.
It was a bad day. It was a bad day. Because Mickey was a good guy. He was a good teacher. He was a good mentor, and was just generally a good guy.
It, of course, is always a shock when someone that you work with, leaves and doesn't come back. And we got through it.
It was really devastating, but I tell you that there was such a professional crew that they knew that they had to move forward with the news day, and that the death of their beloved anchor was a big part of the news, and would really touch people out in the audience.
For all of us at Channel 3, he obviously leaves a tremendous void. Our thoughts are with his wife and 3 children, his family, his many friends and fans. We shall all miss him a lot. Rest in peace, Mickey.
And then Div takes over, Marcellus takes over, and he becomes an institution.
He had his ways that he wanted to do things when he took over as news director, but yeah, I think he was shaped by the people he worked around. How can you not be shaped by the people you worked around?
Marcellus trained under Mickey for years, so he picked up a lot of the good habits.
He'd come up through the ranks. He'd been a reporter, and a pretty good one, too.
I think people trusted Marcellus when he reported the news.
It was an opportunity when I took over in October of '84 to sort of change how we were doing things.
Marcellus had a different look about him, a different way of doing his presentation than what had come before. And it was, again, a reflection, a mirror of what Vermont was becoming.
Richard Gallagher was a political reporter. He loved politics. Every day we were leading with, Governor Snelling said today, Governor Snelling did this today, and I broke away from that.
So he became even more of an institution than Mickey had been. He became something that a lot of Vermonters, I think, didn't feel their day was complete unless they turned on Channel 3 and saw him on Channel 3 and all was right with the world.
WCAX has a commitment to covering local issues like the bicentennial. I mean, what a project.
Channel 3 News begins a 14-month journey around this state.
In 1990-91, Channel 3 attempted to tell the story of Vermont, specifically in the 200th anniversary of its founding. It was an opportunity to look at the past, where it was in the present, and look to the future.
I mean, I personally learned so much about Vermont in that bicentennial project. It was 14 months long.
We shot 1,200 20-minute field tapes. We did 73 hours of live broadcasts. If we'd known what we were going to get into, we never would have done it.
For a local station to do something like that, for a daily news broadcast, that's very unique.
There were actually meetings I was told about later in the summer to try to scale back the scope of the project. But Mr. Martin said, no, this is an investment in this place that we cover.
You talk about public service. That's a hell of a public service, baby.
We looked at it and said, that's Vermont. That's what needs to be told. We'll tell it.
But as times changed, so did Channel 3. The faces people grew up with were replaced by new ones. And WCAX would have to find new ways to tell Vermont's stories.
The station is changing with the times, with people changing and technology changing. You have to.
We're surrounded by corporate-owned stations and corporate-owned media that have a lot bigger resources than we do, and it's a daily fight to keep going.
This is a tough time for broadcasting. Over the recent decades, we've seen the demise, especially of local radio.
Unfortunately, I think, we're turning over faster these days, and it's tough. It's tough.
In 2008, recession hit America, and like many local businesses, WCAX felt its impact.
It hit everyone really, really, really hard. And, as a media company, we were not immune to that.
We had layoffs here for the first time in the history of the station.
The company regrets these layoffs, but felt that they were unavoidable in the current economic climate. Out of respect for their privacy, we are not identifying those who were directly affected, but we shall miss them. And we wish them all the best of luck.
Peter and Alex made a point of being upfront with people, and just you could see, sorry, you could see how difficult it was.
And I think it was a major reality check for everyone who worked here.
That made us have to rethink where we were. Staying stagnant, being what we have been for 50, 60 years, wasn't going to be enough.
The nature of media is clearly changing.
There are definitely changes over time. Technology is one of the things that really pushes change.
And look at what we've done, how we've expanded into social media and the web. And it just shows we're reaching so many more people as a result.
So you try to keep those core journalistic goals while adapting to the ever-changing technology. Maybe the last 3 or 4 years has been one of the most tumultuous times in the Channel 3 news department, but at its core, we're still doing the same thing, and I think people still trust in us.
I think it is changing, and the good news is that Channel 3 has changed with it.
As I tell my students, it's never the technology, it's the people working the technology. The important thing is, can you write?
Tell the stories that are important to people in this area.
The reason it's still existing after all these years, people know there's a local connection to it.
With a locally and family-owned station, the decisions are made right here.
We come from this community. We are you.
The fabric of what really makes Channel 3 works is they know where those kind of stories are.
We don't have corporations telling us what to cover, when to cover, how to look, what stories matter. We know what stories matter. We live here. Many of us grew up here.
Everybody that makes the decisions is right here in Vermont and knows what's important to us and to everybody in the community.
A Vermont station, it's run by Vermonters, people who live here, and I mean, think about it, buy Vermont first. Before it became cool, we were doing it.
It's speaking to us about ourselves and how we're seen, and that's dreadfully important.
That idea of taking an issue and looking at it from all sides was critical to Red Martin. It's still critical in the newsroom today.
This is a station that's owned by a man and his family.
As long as they keep up the journalism and remember, this is what got you here. This is what's going to bring you into the future.
The story of Vermont is told well at that shop at this point because of the Martins, because of all the people that have come through in the last 60 years.
It has stayed a family affair forever, from 60 years, and that's unique.